illegal gaming.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Bullock at the WSFA 12 News Digital Desk, and we are taking you live to the Alabama State House for a news conference about gaming. That is a gaming commission that has been set up. There has been a study commission to look into a possible Alabama statewide lottery, possibly expanding casino gaming, and possibly allowing sports betting. So those are all topics on the table for this year's legislative session, which started yesterday. So let's take you over there now.
One thing I want to make perfectly clear and everyone to understand that I'm no way a proponent of gambling expansion. What I am, however, in favor of is a proponent, and I am a firm proponent, of enforcing the law. The biggest impact on the legislation, Chris, is about to walk you through in the handouts that you have been given today. Include those. I looked at the facilities here and here, or over here. You know, these are some pictures that I personally have taken. I've witnessed this with my own eyes. Our goal here is to run the bad actors out of our state, and once you review all the material that we've handed you, as well as the bill today, I think you will see the same. Above all, we believe the people deserve the right to vote on this issue. You know, everywhere I go back home, neighbors, constituents, it never fails. Why can't we vote on this issue? If gambling is illegal, then why do I see those machines at my local convenience stores? You know, I've seen the polling, and I've personally heard from folks everywhere that I go. The people want to vote, and they deserve the right to vote. It's been 25 years since they've had that opportunity, and we're going to give them our hardest work this session to try and make that happen. With that, I would like to turn it over to my friend, Representative Sam Jones.
Thank you, Representative Witt. I'm Representative Sam Jones, and I chair the Gaming Committee for the Alabama House Democratic Conference. And we have worked for some time with Representative Witt, with Representative Blackshear. In the initial stages, when they talked about gaming, we told them we had some interest and some concerns that we would like to talk to them about prior to putting anything on paper. They actually worked with us on that. We've been working on this since the end of the last session. And there have been a lot of meetings, a lot of phone calls, a lot of Zoom meetings to talk about various things within the legislation. We really think that the process that's taken place with this legislation is something that we really need to use on a lot of important issues that we actually deal with in the legislature. It doesn't make sense for us to start at the end of putting something together to start discussing what our thoughts are about it. This legislation has been put together differently than I've seen any. The gaming legislation in the past, we had it put on our desk and that was it. Now we've had an opportunity to discuss various issues. We've looked at various parts of the legislation that we thought we should be a part of and we should be talking about before it got to the point of coming to the floor. That has happened, and we are appreciative for that opportunity because we've not seen that in the past. And I really want to commend the Speaker on the way that he has handled this, the way we put it together. We've seen other gaming legislation, and, you know, some of that gaming legislation had a lot of good things in it. The thing about it was nobody knew how it originated, how it would be employed, how it would be implemented, and this was a different approach, and I think this is a good approach. We have looked at every area of the legislation, we didn't have a copy of the legislation like anyone else. We'd bring up subject matter, they would discuss that particular subject matter with us. We bring up some concern, they would discuss that particular concern with us. Did we get everything we wanted? No. Nobody ever does in this process. But we did get to a point where we could reach some common ground and where we could work together to make sure that the people of Alabama had an opportunity to cast their vote for gaming. it's been a long time since people have voiced their opinion on wanting to vote on this particular issue. And we agree that we should provide that opportunity for people. But as legislators, a part of our job is to look at the details of what's being put before the public, to look at how it would actually operate, what the enforcement mechanism will be, what the governing mechanism will be, and how we get involvement in all of that. And that's what we've been going through. That's basically the gist of most of our discussion. So at this point, we think that this process is one that we believe in and we think can work with this and a lot of other things. Now we are at the point where our members get a chance to actually read the legislation, actually see the delegation actually see it, and we get an opportunity then to assess where we are as a body with this legislation and move it forward from one point to another. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Greg Albritton, State Senator. First off, I want to thank the governor for her comments last evening and bringing this issue to the forefront. I want to thank my friends behind me. That way, when we turn around to run, they'll be in the front. Representative Witt, Representative Blacksher, and Representative Jones, who have marshaled these bills through, two bills, a constitutional amendment and enabling. You'll find that these bills consist of a total of approximately 150 pages. It's not an easy piece of legislation, as y'all well know. If we will be successful in adopting these bills as these gentlemen here have developed it, you will find that Alabama has the opportunity to capture this industry, to cap it, to stop its growth, and to collect on it. It will give Alabama the opportunity to regulate this cancerous growth that continues to spread throughout our state, throughout our homes, and through our phones, and through our computers, and through our communities. We need to control this. We need to capture it. We need to stop its growth. That's what this bill does. We've worked a long time on this. We as a people have questioned why we haven't been able to accomplish this. Ladies and gentlemen, we're closer now than we have ever been to getting this matter put to rest, put under the authority of the state to be able to control it. I applaud their efforts. Thank you for your time. I invite all to read our 150 most enthralling pages.
That's a tough act to follow. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Blackshear, Representative Chris Blackshear. We'll be carrying the gaming legislation if the opportunity arises for it to make the floor, but also carrying it through economic development tourism, as I believe the committee that probably will go to. And I think Representative Witt and Representative Jones and Senator Albritton have already touched on this. We're fooling ourselves if we don't think, number one, that gaming does not exist today in the state of Alabama, because it does. And more specifically, gambling exists in the state of Alabama. And it has been for over 40 years. Is it happening on our cell phones? Yes. Is it illegal? Yes. Is it happening with slot machines, casinos? Yes. In the backs of laundromats, in the back of florists, in the back of grocery stores, in the back of barbershops. It's not the big brick and mortars that we see when we drive around the state that you're familiar with. It's in all 67 counties. As Representative Witt said, the process and this whole, what we've been doing is completely have been transparent, and I highly recommend this going forward. We're actually created this legislation from the inside out. It's actually no offense to any of the lobbyists and special interest groups in the room, but it's been kind of fun having you on the back end of things instead of on the front end of things. I highly encourage my colleagues that, as Representative Jones says, we ought to do this more often going forward. Because, again, this legislation was drafted by our investigation, our boots on the ground, our own eyes, what we've seen. And this just hadn't been a 12 or 14-month process. This started back with the legislation back in 2021 when it failed to make the floor. So this has been a 3+ year process just with the few of us up here engaged, much longer for Senator Albritton. But the message is very clear. As you see the numbers up here, the people want to vote. In fact, my preacher every Sunday asks, when are you going to let me vote? I'm a no at the polls, but I want my constitutional right to have that right to cast that ballot at the polls. And again, keep that in mind. We can put any piece of legislation together that we want, but it will only pass and become law if the citizens make that decision, not your legislators that are elected here. We're just trying to get a framework together that we think would work best for all. And again, there's no perfect piece of legislation when you're talking about gaming and gambling in any state, especially in the situation that we're in. I want to be very clear, things are about to heat up. Well, it's already heated up in this room, actually, but preferably around the special interest groups. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, which is about, 10 minutes ago, my colleagues in the House all received an email copy of the legislation. I will be introducing the legislation tomorrow when we come into session for the third day of this legislative session. Just know a lot of calls will start coming in because a lot of the outside groups are finally getting to see the bill for the very first time, which I think is the way it needs to be. We are the elected officials. We are the ones that draft the legislation, and we are the ones that are responsible for it and responsible to the people. So I want to go through a few things real quick, and I'm very long-winded, so I'm going to try to get this very high level for you guys. As Senator Albritton discussed, there's two bills. First is the constitutional amendment, the CA, which would create on the ballot. That bill is only 9 pages, very simple. But what it does is it takes everything that exists in Alabama today and completely implodes it. All local CAs, all 18 of them, will be abolished and removed. In fact, going forward in the legislation, there will never be another local CA relating to gaming that can ever come through the body for the local people in our 67 counties to vote on. We here within the state will take over control and regulating of gaming in Alabama. What would those gamings be? We will now set what is legal in Alabama. That will be casinos, a state lottery, sports betting, bingo, and traditional, which is raffles and traditional bingo, which is paper bingo. That will be the only 5 things that will be legal in the state of Alabama. Also, there will be a commission established, which will be the Gaming Commission. It will fall under the executive branch. Underneath that, they will hire an executive director of that branch. There will also be a lottery corporation, a 7-member board that will fall underneath that. The Gaming Commission overall will be a 9-person board appointed by various officials throughout the state, none of which have majority appointing ability to that board. Also, people of that board can be removed at any time for cause if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing on that board. It also gives the authority to the governor to enter compact negotiations with PCI, the Porch Creek Indians, which have 3 locations and has been existing for years in the state. And I think the biggest and most important thing in here, it establishes the enforcement division of the Gaming Commission. There will be an enforcement wing where we will hire investigators, auditors, and everything else that we need to do, accountants. We will specifically focus on gaming in Alabama. It will not be a part of ALEA. It will not be a part of the AG's office. It will be underneath the Gaming Commission where we can focus solely on what's happening with gaming in Alabama. It also establishes that only 7 licenses will be issued, one of which will be reserved for compact negotiations with PCI. The locations of those 7 are Mobile County, Macon County, Houston County, Lowndes County, Greene County, and the city of Birmingham, and one in the northeast quadrant of the state for potential compact with PCI. Notice I said the county. I didn't say a location. I didn't say a particular name of an entity today. It is a true open bid process. We will be establishing a minimum bid for the initial license. That's $5 million. There is no cap. There is a minimum phase 1 investment, which is $35 million. Ground must be broke within 12 months. And that is also for all 7 of the locations. And again, there is no cap on that. So a total of 10 locations is the max. If you want to count the 3 PCI locations that we have now will be the absolute max. What happens going forward, as we've seen the 18 CAs before that's been passed, Well, the Gaming Commission will not have the authority to add any additional license going forward. For example, if somebody else wants to issue an 8th license, that will have to come in the form of a resolution from the Gaming Commission. It will come to the bodies of the House and the Senate, and that must be passed by 3/5 vote to make that happen. So we, the elected officials, are taking back control of gambling and gaming in the state of Alabama. The fund distributions, real quick to touch on that. No earmarkings except for 2 little small things, and we'll touch on those in a second. One, the lottery will be 100% an education lottery. There will be a supplemental appropriation bucket set up underneath the ETF budget in both the House and Senate, which will be funded. Gaming gaming funds will come out of that each and every year. Non-reoccurring expenses. Some of the ideas we're looking at for that is school safety, school resource officers, one-time non-reoccurring expenses, and also one thing we're really proud of, last dollar scholarships, specifically for our 2-year colleges and our technical colleges, where we can tie that into our workforce development program that we're establishing now coming out of the Lieutenant Governor's office. The other bucket will be under the general fund. That's where all of the gaming will go. That will be your sports betting money and all your casino dollars. That will go into a separate supplemental appropriation that will be under the general fund budget in both the House and Senate. Those will be non-reoccurring expenses as well, and those will be appropriated through a supplemental process year over year. That way we can pivot to what our needs will be year over year. And I think the best example we were given the other day is that we had this in place in 2020 when COVID hit. It gave us the flexibility to we could address some of our citizens' needs a lot faster than what we did, waiting on federal dollars. We could have some sitting there with that. One thing to note in the general fund bucket, if you guys remember, this has been covering us a couple of years ago, we established the savings account, the rainy day funds within general fund. That balance right now is about $150 million in it. We will get that money up and that balance up to $300 million before we start distributing money. So we're going to build up our savings even more, because if you keep been seeing our budget numbers, 902.4% on interest is why we have so much surplus right now in the general fund. That will go away. So we're trying to budget and prepare for the bad days to come, not the good days that we've been having year over year. How it will work, the final thing I will put in there as far as the taxation, the tax rate, 24% is the casino tax rate, 17% sports betting. And I'm going to be clear on the last thing, and it's unfortunate that you read, and I understand I used to be on the other side of the media, and I understand you have a job you have to do. The only thing that I ask, report facts. If you don't know the facts, ask. We will give them to you. Opinions or opinion columns, facts are for stories and news stories. That's all I ask. I understand we all have things that we have to do and companies that we work for. And one thing I want to stress is out there as an example of how we're going to shut down the control of this and really control it. We have a provision in this law, in this general law, that's going to be, I've seen about casinoing, and it's going to be sports betting and casinos on every single iPhone. First off, sports betting is an app you have to download. It is not an iOS Apple phone update. When you update your next phone from Apple, you have to selectively go do it. And it's happening every day. In fact, last year, 1.93 million sports bets were attempted in the state of Alabama that were blocked by firewalls. Also, there is no casinos on your phone. That is specifically prohibited. So only sports betting, which has background checks the same. I'm going to, about show of hands real quick. How many do online banking? Seriously, who does online banking? Who pays the bills? Okay, I know some don't want to raise their hands, but the same background checks that you have as far as data protection, integrity, verification, age verification, data verification, it's the same the sports betting, the credible ones use. Not the bookies today that have their apps they pay, not the offshore accounts that, unfortunately, I have friends that do it today, and we want to make sure they're doing it the right way. So that's all I ask is when we report things, let's make sure we report it accurately. I think Representative Witt and I and Senator Albrecht and Senator Jones are pretty accessible when we need things. So with that, I'll pause there, open it up for questions for any of us.
In the past, 63 votes has proven elusive for a lot of gambling bills. Do you have a rough vote count? How close are you to that?
Somebody asked me that a couple weeks ago, and I told them it was We've been moved out of ICU and we're in a private room and we're continuing treatment. And I'm waiting on our discharge date. So we're trending in the right direction to be able to leave our hospital room. I like where we are. And a lot of that's because we've been communicating for weeks, months with our colleagues. And we've had open communications even with the no votes or the people that are having issues with it. Our job is to educate and inform, so you can make an informed decision at the end of the day, because they're the ones that had to go back and answer to their constituents. You know, are you going to allow them to vote? And at the end of the day, that's the question. Are you going to allow your 45,000 plus constituents to place a vote at the polls?
With the constitutional amendment, is the vote for that going to be on the November general election ballot?
Yes, it'll be on the November general election ballot.
Representative Jones, earlier we were here for the Democratic Caucus press conference.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on them? You're the lone Democrat up there. What are your thoughts on bringing their agreeableness to this process?
Well, I think as the process has worked, our caucus is pretty pleased with the process. I couldn't dare talk about what they think about the bill. They haven't read it yet. They'll get it today, and after we get it today, then we'll talk to them about that.
Ready?
This is for anyone up there. We've been working on this issue, as you pointed out, Senator Albright has seen this for a number of years. If I'm sitting at home and I'm listening to this and I'm watching you guys, what do I take away about what is different now than what's been different in the past?
It's not a matter of what's different, if I might. If the public wants to vote on this, call right now, today, and every day hereafter to your local legislator, every representative and every senator, and tell them to vote for this bill. I know many of them have not read it, but there's nothing really new in this bill, substantially. We've seen all this before. Let the public tell the legislature what their need is, and let's get this done. That's what's different.
I would like to add one thing to that. When you see these numbers up here that I failed to mention, to really make sure, when we said we dug in and we had the boots on the ground, to get these numbers that you see up here on this polling, we wrote the questions ourselves. Because we specifically wanted to ask them where we were not doing a push poll, we were not doing something to get the answers that we wanted so it looked good when we printed it or we shared it with our constituents and we sent it out in an email. We wanted to find out, were we on the right track or were we not? So we wrote the questions and we went into details of casinos, of sports betting, and the final question that led to this 91%. The last question was, and Representative Witt, if I miss and or in here, please correct me. It was, no matter your stance on gambling, do you think you, as a citizen of Alabama, should have the right to vote on casinos, sports betting, and a lottery to be in Alabama? 91% was a yes. And I'll even go a little bit deeper because we were asked this question. If you pull out just Republican voters, that 91 goes to 91.7%.
Representative Blackshear, you're doing a gaming enforcement division. They'll have their own officers underneath there. But what do you deal with district attorneys that refuse to prosecute the illegal gaming that's going on in the state?
We will have the authority to be able to go through the courts that we need to. A lot of the problems, you go back, look, there's 67 DAs. Some split, some counties do, there's 67 sheriffs. And the super majority of all of those do it right each and every day. But during our investigation, we have found some pockets of issues. So we have the legislation written so we can work around that, but we will have the authority with the enforcement division to go in and do what we need to do. Now, we're not talking about local crimes there. We're talking specific things within the casinos that happens there, whether it's the audits, whether it's money being taken specifically to the casino. We'll have full authority under the enforcement division to do that, and we'll be able to have APOS certified officers in there as well too that will be able to make arrests and do what they need to. You want to add?
Yeah, let me add some of that. Let's not be critical of the district attorneys. Part of the problem of enforcement is the laws that we have passed. It's those 19 local CAs. It's the number of court decisions that are out there. Our enforcement cannot enforce the way it should. We can't shut down. We've tried all this before. So don't blame the DAs on this. The problem is ours in that we haven't passed the correct laws to deal with it. That's what this bill does. And we're not ignoring But what we're doing is just like the Securities Commission, just like the ABC, this is a unique business. This has unique criteria in it. We need unique people that understand this and do this daily to go out and enforce this. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
Representative Blackshear, going back to the Gaming Enforcement Division, any idea on the size of that division, how many officers will be a part of that?
No, that will be made a determination because the gaming commission will hire their executive director, and then the executive director will be responsible for hiring who's over the enforcement division. And based upon the needs, they'll have the flexibility to hire and train what they need.
Where's the funding going to come from for that division?
The voluntary taxes of voluntary gaming, people visiting those facilities, it'll all be self-funded.
Is the plan dependent at all on the governor reaching that compact with the PCI, or is that would that be part of it?
That's just part of it. It's not dependent upon that, but that is part of it. Again, the CA just gives her the flexibility she shall negotiate with the PCI, and she may enter a compact. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the process. Representative Jones said that your committee has been meeting on this since the end of the last session. Representative Blackshear said that you have been meeting on this for 3 years. Yet I have never seen a public notice on any of these committee meetings. Who are you meeting with, and are you going to release the minutes of those meetings? And why were both the press and the public barred from having input in this piece of legislation until now, when you are poised to introduce this 150-page bill? Did you intentionally ignore normal legislative procedures and the spirit of the Open Meetings Act, if not the letter of the law?
Let me answer the part of the question pertaining to what I was referring to. Our caucus, Democratic caucus, has an ad hoc committee that just reviewed this particular legislation. It's not a standing committee, and all they did was talk to the sponsors of the bill to try to extract information on the issues we had. We didn't have a caucus meeting. This was 6 or 7 people who came to Montgomery and met and talked about how we're going to approach the legislation.
We have time for one more.
When will the bill be in committee? And some members are expecting an attempt at a vote as soon as next week. And if so, why not give more time for the public to look at this?
Well, yeah, I'll just answer that real quickly. I think that you'll see the bill move fairly quickly next week. I think that once the bill is dropped and we give ample time for all the members to read the bill, that this is the elephant in the room, as it always has been. We need to vote it up, vote it down, and move on to other legislation. So I would look for it to move early in the session. Thank you.
Quickly, does that mean aiming for a floor?
We have not determined that schedule at this time, but thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you. Thank you.
And there you have it, a news conference from the Alabama House Gaming Study. Live from the State House, I'm Mark Bullock at the WSFA Digital Desk. I'll recap a little bit about what you just heard. It was a very in-depth news conference. It lasted quite a while to talk about 150 pages worth of legislation, including a constitutional amendment, meaning Alabamians will have a chance to vote on all of this in the November general election. This is what this legislation would do. It would basically get control of the gambling industry as it exists in Alabama, tax and regulate that industry, decide what is legal, what is not legal. It would establish an education lottery, a lottery that would benefit scholarships for two-year colleges in the state. It would allow sports betting on your mobile devices. It would allow raffles and paper bingo. And it would allow brick and mortar casinos, essentially the 3 Indian casinos that we have now, and it would allow 7 other casinos in certain counties. Now, that does not necessarily mean that the casinos we have now will be grandfathered in under this bill. It sounds as though those casinos will have to apply to be one of the 7 casinos that are allowed under this legislation. They'll have to go and do that and compete with anyone else who also wants to be one of the legal casinos in the state. And again, this discussion has been going on in Alabama for decades. It's been just about a year or a little bit more than a year that this House Gaming Study Commission has been meeting. This is what they have come up with. And they say that as part of this legislation, there would be both a lottery commission and a gaming commission. The lottery commission would oversee the statewide education lottery, and then the other commission would oversee everything else. And that commission would have its own enforcement division, meaning that the Attorney General would not have to get involved in gambling related issues. Instead, law enforcement in that arena would be taken up by the enforcement division of the newly established Gaming Commission in Alabama. So a lot to this legislation. As you heard, the only people that have really looked through it are the representatives and the senator who you saw in that news conference. So we'll be getting reaction from other lawmakers over the next couple of days, and we'll of course have more on the specifics of the legislation coming up in our evening newscasts tonight, which start at 4, and then we'll also be here at 5 and 6, and then 9 and 10 later in the evening. So we hope you can join us on air for that. We'll also be posting updates, as always, to the WSFA 12 News mobile app and to WSFA.com. I'm Mark Bullock in the WSFA 12 newsroom, specifically at the digital desk, as we like to call it. We appreciate your joining us today, and we'll see you later tonight on air.